Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Hello and welcome to another Uposatha Day talk. This day being the full moon of September and representing, what is that, 2/3 of the way through this 3-month period of rains retreat for monks and nuns all around the world. Some observing strict times of more formal practice, those living in busy monasteries of many monks with many visitors taking the opportunity to live with more seclusion, practicing alone. I'm very fortunate to be in that situation all of the year round, living here alone in Sri Lanka, but also well supported by the lay community. The lay Buddhist men and women and children surrounding me here in this area. And on these Uposatha days, I always begin with the Buddha's reflection on, when addressing his bhikkhus, how well are you, well, more specifically, time marches relentlessly by, or the days and nights march on, something of this nature. Anyway, time flies, doesn't it? And how well have we been spending that time? Have we eradicated greed, eradicated hatred, eradicated delusion in ourselves? Now, we can't expect to change the entire world. We cannot change humanity. We cannot change all beings. We can change ourselves. That is what I talk about here. And today, specifically, I'm going to talk about how to stop doubt. That is, not doubt in oneself, although it could be some of that, but doubt in the teachings of the Buddha, the practice. Or, specifically, maybe it's doubt in meditation, or doubt in devotional practices, or doubt in religion in general. Maybe it's doubt in teachers, or monks, or attained people in general. So doubt, a lack of confidence. In other words, a lack of faith. Faith aside from the kind of blind faith, a belief in something you've been told, so it has to be true. Of course, we know that isn't the case. This full moon day in September, our lunar calendar we monastics operate by, is clearly represented in a clear sky on these occasions of the full moon, the new moon, or dark moon, as some people call it, and even the quarter moon, so those half moons, one side or the other, leading to one or the other, are easily visible, aren't they, in the sky on a clear night. But I can say now it is the full moon. And many people around the world watching this, it may be daytime, it may still be night, but it may be cloudy. They can't see that. They can't see the full moon for themselves. So they can, to some extent, have blind faith in that I've got no reason to say it's otherwise. I'm not going to say it's the new moon when it's the full moon, or vice versa. But on occasions, and unfortunately mostly in this part of the world, you can simply go outside at around midnight, look into the sky, and directly above you, like the sun is above you at noon, at its meridian. Is that the right word? I think so. The full shining moon above you in all its glory. You can see it clearly. We have a word for this in Buddhism, a Pali word, the Pali language we use from the ancient scriptures. It's vipassana, which means to see clearly. It's also used to describe a style of meditation, gaining insight, seeing clearly within one's self. Now, I rarely quote Pali scripture because I don't know it off by heart, but a chant I repeat every day in the reflections each morning after the reflections on the 9 qualities of the Buddha is the qualities of the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, followed by those of the Sangha. And in the chant with regards to the Dharma, bearing in mind these chants are not prayers, they're not a form of worship, they're either reflections or the actual teachings of the Buddha himself, put into verse, to be easily remembered and reflected upon regularly. This is the basis of chanting. It isn't a rite or a ritual. It isn't an obsession of prayer so many times a day in a certain time, a certain place, even in a certain direction. It isn't a reinforcement of a belief. Sometimes you think, or it's thought, if you say something time and time again, repeat something to someone or to yourself, well, eventually it will just become true. Like telling a lie. You can eventually, if you continue to tell the same lie for your entire life, almost believe it's true, the truth. Maybe, maybe not. This isn't seeing clearly. Well, it's not seeing clearly the truth. But swagato bhagavata dhammo sanditiko akaliko ehipasiko opanayiko pachatam veditabo vinyuhiti means apparent, paying homage to the teachings of the Buddha, the Dharma, which is apparent here and now. Something that can be seen here and now, in the present. It's timeless. It hasn't aged. What was taught 2,568 years ago is as relevant today as it was then. People say, oh, but we have such busy lives now. Oh, there's the internet. Oh, there are wars. There is this, there is that. There's always been entertainment. There has always been wars. And there has always been this and that. Long before the Buddha. This is why he came along and was able to discover for himself, making him the Sama Sambuddha, that is a perfectly enlightened one, with no Buddhism around, no dharma there to be learned, or for him to have been taught. He had to discover through his own ascetic practices, having been taught meditation by previous teachers through a long tradition of meditation in his country of origin, in India, in northeast India at the time. He had to learn for himself, discover the cause of what? Suffering. What he teaches. That's all the Buddha teaches. There's suffering and this cause of suffering. He identified the cause. And that cause is the same now as it was back then. It's either not wanting a situation as it is, so not wanting something you have, or wanting something you have not got. And when you have something you've got, not wanting to lose what you've got, or to want more of that same. It's all suffering. From chronic pain to just having nothing to do, being a little bored. Someone once said that all the problems of the world could be solved if only an individual could just sit in a room with nothing to do, stay still and be quiet. Because we don't have that capability. We're following always our desires, the cause of suffering. So that's timeless. But it isn't saying just sit and do nothing, although that is a large part of it. It goes on in the translation, encouraging investigation, leading inwards. So it is developing wisdom, we call in the Pali Panya, but through samadhi, meditation. So we can look inwardly, inside, for that knowledge, for that understanding, for that clarification. And by developing our skills in meditation, we develop the ability to see clearly, vipassana, or insight. But it literally means seeing clearly. Insight, the qualities of existence, or the characteristics of existence. Being, that all things are impermanent. They're suffering, they're unsatisfactory, and out of our control. Or more usually described as not self. You see, you are not a self, a person of really any substance, but only awareness, only the awareness of this physical body and this thinking brain, clearly through the practice of meditation. This is developing our wisdom through the power of investigation, which the Buddha is encouraging in his teachings, but inwardly. It's not going out to all of the libraries in the world or doing all of the internet searches possible, listening to every teacher on the planet, and absorbing as much intellectual information as very much possible. It's not even learning the Sutta Pitaka, the 3 baskets of the Buddhist scriptures, the Pali Canon, the Vinaya Pitaka, the rules for monks and nuns, the Sutta Pitaka, the Dharma, the suttas, the words of the Buddha, the teachings, the talks, the desanas, or the Abhidharma, the later, more in-depth analysis of all of that. It's not that. That can be done as well to help strengthen our mind's ability, like a muscle, giving it strength to use what it sees clearly, wisely. That strength, like the strength of a muscle, to lift something heavy, but lift something heavy in a useful way, not just go around lifting everything unnecessarily, reaping havoc. And finally, in the translation of that short verse, to be experienced individually by the wise. Experienced, yes? So this is a dharma, the teachings of the Buddha. The dharma is experiential. It's not belief. The teachings are how to get there, how to see clearly, to understand it. They're not, oh, this is the way it is, you must believe that. There is this God who made everything. This earth is flat. Planes fly because of prayer. If everyone stops praying, it will fall from the sky. This is blind belief. But when we are able to see clearly the true characteristics of existence, we're seeing what is the Dharma, and that is not belief. It's experienced individually by the wise. But when the Buddha discovered this on his enlightenment in Bodh Gaya, he was reluctant to try and go anywhere further than his comfortable lair of grass under the Bodhi tree, where he could have stayed in bliss for the rest of his living days, comfortably and happily, having attained to contentment. Because he felt that most people would not really want to hear this simple truth. Because mostly in those times, and perhaps to some extent today, people would prefer, or do prefer, to have a belief that something else creates everything and therefore is responsible. Someone to be blamed when things go wrong. Also someone to be praised when things are good. And when you're really in the worst conditions and states, someone to pray to and ask to free you from that suffering and get you out of that suffering. Well, how's that working? Yeah? Does it work? Maybe it does. Maybe it even helps you help yourself by placing confidence externally. Encouraging investigation, leading inwards. You see, we're not going out to a higher power, higher being, a God, or many gods, asking for help. We're looking inwardly for the solution. And the solution is to establish the cause of suffering. I'm only talking about liberation here, freedom from suffering in this lifetime. But that's the ultimate goal in Buddhism. It isn't eternal life in a heaven or a hell, which you can only believe. It cannot be proven. But it is the fact, as is proven by those who have experienced it, living today, and can also show you the way, that you can be free from suffering within this lifetime. That is what I'm talking about today. Now, the Buddha's reluctance was because there are so many teachings out there in his time and as there are now. So many beliefs from established old religions like the Islamic faith, Judaic faiths, Christianity, to more unusual and perhaps less commonly believed but very prevalent and relevant in this day and age conspiracy theories of all kinds going on there, especially with access to so much online. This, when Sahampati came from the Brahma realms, I know I'm talking about deities and gods here, and to some extent this is to depict, it's an analogy if you like. But when one has developed the ability to see clearly, you can see the actual reality of such an analogy to the extent of its truth, the truth within it. But the Buddha, reluctant to go out and teach, was convinced, maybe only by his own conscience or conscientiousness. We call hiriendotapa in the Pali words, but nevertheless, they keep us from straying from the path of sila, moral virtue, but they also direct us in the right way, using what we have in terms of metta, loving kindness, kindness to all beings, from the smallest to the largest, from the ones we like to the ones we don't. Karuna, compassion, mudita, joy for others, or just joy even for ourselves. And upekkha, equanimity, because all of this has to begin with ourselves, not in a selfish, uncaring way, but without helping ourselves first, we cannot help others. Like you must put your oxygen mask on in the aeroplane before you can even help your own baby with his or her oxygen mask. Sahampati said to the Buddha, "There are those with little dust in their eyes." Now what he was referring to there is these, in that translation, to be experienced individually by the wise. Now this isn't wise as in already enlightened or halfway there with the Dharma, because of course they haven't heard it yet. But those with little to cloud their view. Those whom are living under a clear midnight sky, seeing that full bright moon in all its glory. Those who can see the truth. As opposed to the majority, because he describes this, there are a few with little dust in their eyes. The majority who have a lot of dust in their eyes and are living under those cloudy skies. So unless told otherwise, it's full moon, they wouldn't know. And many of them are happy to say, well, I would rather believe. It isn't for us to know if it's a full moon for ourselves or not. I can go to this beautiful church, this beautiful temple. I can worship these beautiful images. I can pray to my gods for all of this. And I'm supported in this by the representatives of those religious organizations in all their beautiful robes and beautiful clothings and living in beautiful palaces with gold and silver and jewels. Receiving offerings, practicing generosity. All good, nothing inherently bad in any of that. But where is the truth? When you can step outside of your front door. If you wait long enough, the clouds will part and you'll see that bright and shining moon. That is what the Dharma is asking. That we simply open our eyes and see clearly. Vipassana. Now I've listened to, it must be I can't imagine, an incalculable within this lifetime number of hours of Dharma talks. Not good ones, not bad ones. Nothing's good, nothing's bad. I would say some of whom I would consider my teachers, my favourite monks, dharma talks, I can listen to sometimes for an hour, and maybe a few seconds of the words, a little section, an excerpt, actually hits home as dharma, in that a bell rings and I think, yeah, wow, that's something. You know, if you had a notepad and you're that type of person, you might note it down. A little saying, a few words that you can fully, truly just understand out of all of the blah, 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 blah around it. The locals here refer to listening to the monks in the temples as after the meal or before the meal, they sit down and blah, blah, blah. They hear the blah, blah, blah. It's just the Dharma talk. A lot of it is because, of course, this is just repeated suttas, recited very cleverly in the Pali or in their own local languages, which, if that's what you have, is a really wonderful way to listen to the suttas, listen to the Dharma. But of course, this is quite without feeling. It's not coming from the heart in a used and actively practiced sense that is proof of the pudding, which is in the eating, of course. So someone, however finely represented and surrounded, great their surroundings are, in all its religiosity, quoting verse after verse, is very beautiful to hear, a way to hear the teachings of the Buddha. But they can also be read in a book or online these days. But to see those monks practicing what they preach and doing what they're talking about, living the simple life in rag robes. Which reminds me, I get some new robes at the end of this 3-month retreat, which have been offered by some kind people in Thailand. So these I've not been able to dye very often with the traditional dye, so they're very light now. But at the end of this retreat, I only have one set of robes ever that I use, but they've already arrived. I will make a determination they will be my new set for the next few years. So very simple lives. That is setting an example without even saying a word, without speaking. Like monks going on Pindapata each and every day. We don't speak, we don't answer questions. Sometimes people will really try hard to make you answer a question. Like you've heard the story of Bahir, whom he was so insistent, he asked the Buddha to teach him the Dharma 3 times. The Buddha acquiesced on request of the same thing 3 times. You can either, if you've given an adequate answer, refuse, or you can give a further answer. So he answered that seeing is seeing, hearing, hearing, smelling, smelling, tasting, tasting, touching, touching, thinking, thinking, boom, boom, boom. Very short, succinct Dharma talk. Bahir ran off, became an arahant, he was fully enlightened, got run over by the cow, and that was the end of that. But we don't speak on Alms Round because what we're doing is we're representative of a way of life. So even if it's a glimpse in the corner of someone's eye, driving on their way to work, of a mendicant monk on his own, wandering through a village with his bowl, hoping to get a little food to survive another day, the seed is sown. The seed of Dharma is there in that person's mind. As it was the Buddha, when he first saw such a thing, after seeing the elderly man, the sick man, and the dead man, the 4 heavenly messengers, the 4th being the samana of the time. It wasn't a Buddhist monk, of course, but the samana of the time, a mendicant, a similarly robed kind of ascetic wandering around, but looking peaceful and happy with contentment. And he questioned his own materialistic life of of such luxury and splendor that he had, secluded and protected from all of this suffering, but artificially, because there is always suffering. Otherwise he wouldn't have gone out looking. But it made him question that. Now, the question of doubt is what I said I would talk about today, and I've been talking about the Dharma in the way I have, because it is the foundation, the basis for confidence in the practice, in that we are not being asked to believe anything. We're just being shown a way we can see for ourselves. How to see clearly the truth about these characteristics of our own existence. How we can find the source of suffering in order to eradicate it and find contentment in this lifetime, and therefore happiness and freedom from suffering in this lifetime, freedom from attachment to even this very life itself, and therefore freedom from rebirth. This is the goal. Final liberation from samsara, rebirth, this cycle of growing old, getting sick, dying. Not to mention being born, getting to the stage of even walking, education, starting work, working along many years, retiring, getting old, sick, dying, losing those you love, them losing you eventually. These inevitabilities of life. All of this we chant is reflected upon. This is what we're doing in the temple. Not praying, not worshipping. We're reflecting on these truths about life. So doubt is the fifth of these hindrances. The first being sensual desire, so all of wanting things we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and the things we think about and how we feel, all to be better than it is. Aversion, not liking the way it is. Laziness, just can't be bothered. I'm just dozing off, falling to sleep, rather than trying to practice maybe meditation and focus, or even listening to dharma. Restlessness and worry. And this is really only thinking about the past, worrying about it, and thinking about the future, becoming restless. The past is just memories which are unreliable, very unreliable. And the future, well, it hasn't happened yet, it's just imagination. These are the four hindrances leading to doubt, the fifth hindrance, which many consider a problematical hindrance more than the others, whereas I consider it the simplest in fact. How do you stop doubt? Well, you see for yourself. Just do it. Practice. If it works, you'll have no doubt. If it doesn't, well, you were right. If you don't try, how can you know? There are no Buddhist monks teaching, saying, no, this is actually just the way it is. Okay, you have to believe it. They're saying you must keep the 5 precepts, that's sila. You must meditate, that's samadhi. And you must develop wisdom, but this wisdom of the looking inward kind, as I described, which can be actually demonstrated and seen clearly through samadhi. So as long as you have kept 5 precepts, you can develop samadhi, which is meditation, absorbed states of deep concentration, focus on really nothing, but at least to get us there, a meditation object. Commonly, which is used, is the breath. Now here's an example of where and how doubt arises. Because knowing that is how we can stop doubt. Where someone asked about all of the 16 steps and stages of Anapanasati, the tetrads, leading through to the deep absorbed states of meditation we call jhanas, where you're secluded from these 5 hindrances entirely, where you don't even need to have any concern over your bodily feelings or what your thinking brain is getting up to. Just bliss and joy in this jhana, deep absorbed meditation. And people, or it's been asked that, well, if I'm going through step 1, this tetrad, I'm thinking. Yes, of course you are. Now in Pali we call this word papancha. And it is this papancha, this continual overthinking, is what papancha means, just ruminating, step by step going through things, that doesn't lead to seeing clearly, clarification, just leads to confusion. So when at the beginning I asked how well have we been spending our time, have we eradicated greed, hatred, delusion? Greed is wanting, desire. Hatred, we know, is aversion, not wanting. But delusion, what's that then? Well, delusion is doubt, in a way. It's the cause of doubt. Delusion isn't purely ignorance, a lack of information. It's having the information, or even too much information, but not knowing what to do with it, how to use it, or using it incorrectly. That is delusion. And if we haven't understood delusion, we can't understand how we're deluding ourselves. So some might think, I can't sit and keep my mind on the breath. I'll read about it more and more and more. I'll ask more and more questions. I'll Google. Now, much like if you have a little ailment before you go to the doctors and you open up Google, what happens? Well, it's terminal, isn't it? It can be such a nightmare of opening a can of worms or Pandora's box, whatever expression you need. I suppose Google it is going to be a similar expression of these times. Don't. It's not necessary. The Buddha says quite simply in the Anapanasati Sutta, before it gets too complicated, just watch the breath, sit there. As many of the replies I noted very wisely from people with little dust in their eyes who are clearly seeing, have said. So wipe the dust from your eyes and just see clearly you're breathing. That's it, isn't it? You are breathing in and you're breathing out. And observe this. When we learn to drive, we have put your hand here and your hand here. Your hand 10 to 2 or something like this on the steering wheel. Left hand at 10 to 2, number 10, and right hand at number 2, threading the wheel. And then before you move anywhere, yes, it's mirror, signal, maneuver. Mirror, signal, maneuver. La 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 la. Now who drives around at 10 to 2, mirror, signal, maneuver, when they've been driving for 10 years? No, no one. These are techniques like the Buddha had to use to teach people how to watch their breath in meditation, ways of breaking it down into steps to explain it to those with little dust in their eyes, not to give them more dust to confuse the issue and argue about each step. Well, maybe if you put your hands at 2:45, you'd have a better grip. And maybe if you looked in the mirror twice, or why look in the mirror at all? This is how doubt arises, questioning the intricate details infinitely, rather than just trying it out yourself. Now, if you see all these maybe Google review things or something, stars, 5 stars on a restaurant, for instance, I don't know. Do you believe that? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But certainly if you go to the restaurant yourself and eat the food, you can make your own judgment, your own review, without even offering it to anybody else inwardly. Your own discernment will know if that was something you would, an experience you would wish to repeat, or certainly never again. Or do you blindly believe the number of stars something gets? I don't know. I don't do these things. In fact, I think last time I went to a restaurant, I don't think we even had Google, possibly. Well, I didn't, personally, perhaps. I'm not sure. So doubt arises with too much information, too much thinking, overthinking, papancha, and not enough actual doing. So I was asked actually to talk about, from a Buddhist perspective and a non-Buddhist perspective. And I think it was coming from the point of view of someone maybe trying to convince others to practice meditation, but in the same sense, they were trying to convince themselves. And I'm not singling anyone out here because this is a very common question on one of the 5 hindrances, which is one of the well-known lists. So it's a very good question, nothing wrong with the question at all. But many think that to eradicate doubt, you need more information. And they open this can of worms, Pandora's box, Google search of hyperlinks, rather than just trying something out. Now, certainly if you're trying to show someone else or others bestow the virtues of meditation, you cannot, unless you're really getting and reaping the benefits of meditation yourself. That's why you have monks and nuns teaching, whom have spent many years and also dedicated their lives to solely that practice. There are, with exception, a very few, out of all of the billions of people on this planet, a very few lay Dharma teachers teaching the meditation that I am referring to, those that taught by the Buddha in the suttas. And we all know who those few are. But other than that, unless you're seeing people actually whom are representative of a lifetime of meditation, you're only to gain taking their word for it. And what did the Buddha say in that little chant I chant every morning? We look inwardly. So we must just do it, is the answer. How to stop doubt? We keep 5 precepts. I'm afraid I can't budge on that one. You don't have to expand upon them. I'm not saying that everybody has to follow the Noble Eightfold Path. That expands on Sila in order to enable you to keep the 5 precepts. Now, Buddhist monks, and we reflect upon this on this Uposatha day each and every twice a month, the full moon and new moon, 227 precepts. But even with us monks, it's those 5 core principles, precepts, that the other 222 are there to support and help us keep. So this Dharma is a one-size-fits-all kind of practice, garment. What is always going to be a further hindrance or an obstacle on anyone's progression with regards to Buddhist meditation is, of course, blind belief. So, with the 5 hindrances, to the antidotes, the cures, the vaccinations. Everybody loves vaccinations these days. I don't bother myself, but you've got them. You've got, for sensual desire, we have asubha practices in Pali, which means unbeautiful. So we just look at the unattractive nature of things. So nice food, think of it when you've chewed it up, spat it out. That, for example. For aversion, we use the practice of loving kindness. Just think, well, if someone comes along that you don't like, even if they're an aggressor, at least think, well, their mother loves them unconditionally. And even that will turn away, soften the aversion you have. With laziness, well, don't eat as much food, get more sleep, or just do some walking meditation, slush your face with water, open your eyes to the sun, pull your ears, any of these things. These are the antidotes. Restlessness and worry, well, present moment, here and now. You need to live in a perpetual, uncalculated life in the present. Yes, continually, without thinking about the past or thinking about the future, but continually in all of your daily activities, be mindful of what's going on here and now. This isn't to the exclusion of planning, because your planning is in the present moment to help assist with future events, but it's not taking you and putting your imagination in that place. It's bringing that place into here and now, the present moment. And then finally, doubt, the antidote, is faith, but not blind faith. Not, well, I believe in God, one God, heaven and hell, blah, 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 because it says so in the Bible. Or because the priest told me. Or because my mum or my dad told me that's the way it is. You can do, but that will be a hindrance. It will create doubt in yourself, in that you are the answer to all of your suffering. You, yourself, without assistance from any other source externally, by looking inwardly, can free yourself from suffering in this lifetime and liberate yourself from rebirth. So this antidote for doubt, how to stop doubt, is faith. But faith is better understood and translated. The Pali word for faith is saddha, but better translated as confidence. It doesn't take anything away from the word faith. You can have confidence in the God you believe in. You can be confident there's a God. One doesn't have to exclude the existence. You don't have to become atheist. No, I'm not saying that. The Buddha's not saying that even. But don't rely on that to relieve you from suffering. Only you can do that, relieve yourself from suffering in this lifetime, by identifying its cause. And how do we do that? We follow the Noble Eightfold Path. Practicing sila, keeping those precepts, meditation, samadhi, and this is developing wisdom. There are some very wise teachings in the Bible and all religious scriptures, but one that comes to mind immediately whenever I think of simple lives, my own practice of renunciant life, because some think meditation is just for the renunciant. But it doesn't have to take you all day. You can find a little time in the morning, a little time in the evening around your busy schedules that, like I said at the beginning, have always been the case. People have always had to survive without the aid of all modern day things. Whilst you're now distracted by, let's say, the conveniences of internet and whatever modern technology, and you say, well, they didn't have that in the olden days. No, but they had to go down to the river and bash their clothes on rocks to keep them clean, and they had to go out chasing animals to eat and growing all of their own food. You know, it's like very much time-consuming existences we all lead. Unless you give up all that you want and just live simply on what you need. Like, is it 2 little birds or 3 little birds that Bob Marley sung of, a verse from the Bible? They wake up in the morning and they don't expect anything of tomorrow. Thou should not be anxious for tomorrow, but live in the present moment, here and now, today, that there is food. This dear cat that visits regularly here, it's lives a life of, I admire it mostly for its physical mindfulness, which is, I don't have to ever consider where I put things, like the camera, which is quite precariously balanced, and I'll put my reading glasses, you know, just on the floor. If anybody's going to budge them, knock a glass of something over, or damage anything, it would be this lumbering, great big human being. Whereas this cat can nimbly jump all around this room, from this, literally the ceiling. It jumps up on top of these walls and run around the room at tremendous speed and never even brush against the slightest thing. Now that is complete awareness that it's developed for survival skills, and also it's protecting its surrounding environment. But it's a very wonderful and marvellous example of mindfulness. And we practice this also, continually developing that skill. So I rarely these days tread on my reading glasses or knock a drink over, because I'm able to spend my time wisely. Not only reflecting on how I've been spending my time previously, but more importantly in the present moment, what I'm doing here and now to guard against such things, such events happening. Being careful, sati sampajana we call it. Mindfulness of everything, all that's going on around us. And this skill also is developed in meditation. So we don't have to just be looking for ultimately freedom from suffering and liberation from rebirth. But in the build-up towards that goal, on the path towards enlightenment or attainment to nibbana, we have this gradual development as we reduce greed, as we reduce hatred, and we reduce... Someone didn't like me using that word, reduce, but it's because we do gradually reduce greed, hatred, and delusion in order to eventually eradicate them. But as they reduce, like in the stages of enlightenment, as you go from sotapanna through to eventually arahant, it's a grey area in between, as sensual desire and aversion gradually reduce. They don't just go until you attain to arahantship. But even in non-returner, the stage before arahantship or fully enlightened being, there is still, to some extent, a level of conceit that you are either, in some respects, not as good as another, or better than another, or the same as another. So comparison, drawing any comparison with yourself to another, is a form of conceit. There is also to some extent, a degree of anger. I think it's often thought perhaps forest monks are a little bit angry, unapproachable. I mean, forest monks are approachable, but they will speak matter-of-factly in this way that might come across as a bit harsh and cruel. They're not trying to get anything, you see. They're not selling anything. They're not selling a fluffy bunny idea of rose-tinted glasses and happy, loving kindness all around. They're saying, look, if you do this, you're going to be much better off. If you don't want to do that, go away, don't waste my time, because you're only wasting more of your time rubbing more dust in your eyes. But if those that come with little dust in their eyes ask for help to see more clearly, we can only tell them how to see more clearly with the tools the Buddha has offered us to enable us to do that. We can do no more. But we are not, when I say we, I'm talking about monastics in general, trying to sell an ideal or a belief system. We're not trying to convince someone to even not believe something else, but to try this in the present moment for now as what they can do to make life a whole lot better immediately. Not to be believed, but to be seen. I was going to tell another little story, but I think I'll have to save that until next time, because I don't want to create more cause for doubt. I want the result of listening to what I've spoken of today, hopefully, to be that you can see more clearly that there is no doubt when it comes to the truth. Only when you're expected to believe something can there be doubt. So, if, whether you're Buddhist or you're not Buddhist, it is said the practice is to meditate, where is there doubt? You might not want to, okay, so don't. If you want freedom from suffering, this is one of those tools. It has to be done in order to see clearly. But you're not having to couple that with any belief system, any religiosity you might have seen surrounding Buddhist practice or Buddhism in general. Not even having to go anywhere out of your home or even your car. You can just sit and meditate alone, looking inwardly. So where is the doubt? It can only therefore be in yourself to have the discipline, the determination to sit in that room and not move, not do anything for a little while. Allow the body to just settle for a while so it can become relaxed, and the mind to settle so it can become calm and peaceful. And at first, when people come to meditation, that's all they want, to relax and be calm and peaceful. And that's as good an incentive as any to get those with even a lot of dust in their eyes to come to meditation. But if they think it's against God, their God or their religion, or they think that there's a better way through prayer and worship, then this will only cloud that view of what is there for us all to see. On a night like tonight, the Uposita full moon, bright and shining in the sky, in all of its splendor. I hope there is something useful in there, in which case please use it and share it, take it with you into your practice, even if it's just a few seconds of what I've said. which is only coming from a place of experience and from how I understand and have interpreted our teachers' words in the suttas. Simple. So be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.